Firstly, I'd like to say how delighted I am to be with you, and now that we're all alive, awake, alert and enthusiastic, we can begin. But I'm delighted to be with you and to see so many of you here today. Last night on the beach at Copacabana, it was so inspiring for me as a bishop to see thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of young people down on the beach. And I was thinking that had someone been flying in from outer space and slowly coming down and looking at the beach, what would they have seen? And they would have heard the music which inspired you, and they would have seen the flags flying, and they would have seen the young people, the bishops, all standing there in the drizzle and enjoying themselves. But they might also have focused in on a particular point, which was the first reading. And in the first reading we heard how Samuel in the temple was asleep, and he heard a voice saying his name, Samuel, Samuel. He thought it was the priest Eli calling him, so he went and asked Eli, "Did you call me?" Eli says, "No, I didn't call you." So he went back to sleep and he heard the voice again, "Samuel, Samuel." And again he went to Eli. And the third time, when a voice came to him and he heard his name, he knew it was the Lord. Samuel had to learn how to be able to listen to the Lord and to be able to open his heart. And that essentially is part of World Youth Day, that we can open our hearts to listen to what the Lord is saying to us, as we heard Reeves and Anya saying how the Lord had been speaking to them in their testimonies earlier. Catechesis is about more fully grasping the mystery of God, the mystery of Jesus Christ, and allowing that mystery to take over our lives. So we need to open our hearts and see how the Lord is calling to us, and in what way he's calling each of us by our name in a very particular way. And as we listen to the Lord, so we can grow in our knowledge of the Lord, we can deepen our understanding through our catechesis, we can grow in our love for Christ, opening our heart to him, developing that heart-to-heart relationship with him. And we can grow in following him, allowing the mystery of Christ to take over our lives, to touch us, and give a new shape, and a new horizon, and a new direction to our lives. So the aim of this catechesis is to help to understand the mystery of Christ, who speaks into our hearts and changes us, so that we are changed to be able to respond more fully to him in love and in love of our neighbour. So we can ask ourselves, how are we responding? How is that love of Christ touching us through this World Youth Day? I think as human beings, and particularly as young people, we face three questions to answer in our lives. All of our life will be spent trying to find the answer to these questions and deepening our response to the question, who am I? Who am I? And secondly, am I loved? Thirdly, who do I love? And I want to try to explore those three questions this morning. Who am I? We heard how Anya's life was touched by her family, her prayer, and Reese, that role of the family in terms of helping us to become who we are. And I'm blessed with having a very good family experience, but not everybody has that. And so, as we grow into our teenage years and then become young adults, so we carry with us different experiences of our family. But hopefully, most will have known the love of family and the support of family. and that enables us to grow in trust of other people. We have hopes, the hopes of fulfilling our lives, of doing something with our lives that has meaning and purpose. We have doubts about who we are, perhaps fears about the future. Today many people are fearful of work, fearful of commitment into relationships. Maybe doubts about who I am as a person, and am I lovable? We experience attraction. We experience relationships, friendships, mistakes, failures. And so part of today is perhaps to reflect on that question, who am I? And be able to perhaps bring that answer to Christ in thanksgiving and for healing. Sometimes people are defining themselves by their designer labels. A pair of shoes that another person has makes me envious. Maybe it's to wear a particular label in order to be somebody. I asked one of our young pilgrims from Westminster to look along the perfume labels in the duty-free shop, because there are many names trying to capture us to buy their products to make us feel somebody. Amour, desire, the very sexual images associated with perfumes. There was a brand of cigarettes that was sold some years ago called Hope. What a paradox. So we need to be able to look at the symbols around us, the advertising around us, and ask what message it's giving us. How do I fall into the trap of following it? Maybe it's telling me something that's not true about who I really am. How important is your phone? Phones are wonderful, but we can always want the next version, the next version. And have you ever had that experience of buying something and immediately feeling dissatisfied with it? It doesn't satisfy us, we want the next thing. So therefore, who am I? And part of this catechesis will be to begin to explore that question. Am I loved? Which is a much deeper question. It's a question that many people are struggling with today. Am I loved? Maybe because it's of the insecurity of a family situation. Perhaps the drama of falling into love and out of love. Maybe the worry of failure. Recently I was in a secondary school and I was struck by a number of the girls and the scars on their arms. And this was evidence of self-harming, and now they're getting help. But behind that there's the question of, am I loved? Trying to seek attention, trying to want somebody to give me a meaning. And perhaps for men it's becoming a member of a gang, becoming part of a group that gives me a meaning. In fact, many people's meaning is actually found in football. When I travel up and down to London and there's an Arsenal match, I see all the people with their Arsenal shirts and scarves, and that's their meaning. They're investing a huge amount of money into the tickets, into the matches, into all the clothing. And it's all about belonging and wanting to be part of a group. So am I loved? But that also leads us into the way in which we can begin to open our hearts to experience and know the love of Jesus Christ for us, the one who calls us by our name. And the third question, who do I love? Is there anybody I love? Or is my heart actually very selfish and turned in on itself? Anya mentioned going to Lourdes. My experience with young people in Lourdes from many of our schools last year was their generosity and energy in being with people who were poor and sick and vulnerable. They hadn't always wanted to go. It was only when they got there and got into the experience of caring and helping that they knew they wanted to be there. So when we give ourselves away to others like that in love, then we really do discover who we are, and it is very satisfying and fulfilling. So you come to Rio full of these questions. Who am I? Am I loved? And who do I love? And it's my prayer and hope that through this experience in Rio, you will be touched by Christ, so that you may make some steps in responding to those questions. The theme today is thirsting for hope, thirsting for God, as part of the 3 days on becoming disciples of Christ. Thirsting for hope, thirsting for God. So we might ask what I thirst for, because when we really know what our desires are, we know what we thirst for, and we know how we're living our life and who we are. What do I really thirst for? And ultimately, as human beings, we thirst to be loved and to love. 10 years ago, I was leaving teaching in seminary and going to a parish to work in Nottingham. And I spent a month walking the Camino from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port on the French side of the Pyrenees to Santiago de Compostela in Galicia, the famous Camino of St. James, to the shrine of St. James in Santiago de Compostela.